Hello everyone and welcome to episode 3 of the Carbon Hour podcast. And today we'll be talking climate and the environment, taking a brief look at the latest blockchain news and events and discovering a bit more about our guest today, Dr. Paul Dorfman. Of course, I'm joined by my wonderful co-host today, Jem. How are we doing, Jem?
I'm not doing too bad at all. It's delightful to find ourselves into spring in the UK, so all is well.
Good. Yeah, clocks have gone forward. We're enjoying a little bit more sunshine, which is, I think, much appreciated.
Yeah, I suffered with that one. I completely forgot, and I found myself crawling to bed, should I say, at 2 p.m. and then suffering in the morning. So yeah.
And you've been off school, obviously.
Yes, that. Yep. Today would be our first day, so be a bank holiday Monday. So here we are today, enjoying the next 2 weeks with the family.
Nice, like it. And Paul, Dr. Paul Dorfman, welcome. It's great to have you on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very happy to talk with you all.
It's our pleasure. I do have as always, just have a random question that we ask our guests just to kick things off. And the question today is there a film, book, or TV program that's had a profound impact on you? And I'll start just to sort of kick things off. For me, there's 3 really that I've noted down for this. And the first one would be Planet Earth. I mean, I think the way that's presented, with obviously David Attenborough, just great visuals, great documentaries, really, great facts as well, and often show risks and effects to climate change as well. So that's definitely one of them. The second one that I noted down is The Big Short, which is based on the 2007-2008 financial collapse and the significant role that corporate greed and manipulation played in that. And the third one is Saving Private Ryan. Actually, it's a bit of an offshoot, but for me, that was one of the first films that I've seen that brought the real brutality of war to the screen. And yes, that's something I think many films failed to portray before that.
Yeah.
So they're my ones there. How about yourselves, gents?
Shall I go, Paul? Yes. I as soon as you mentioned book, the first book that I will always say is The Kite Runner. The Kite Runner, I don't know if you're aware of it. It's based in Afghanistan, and I loved how that story.
Oh, Jem, we just lost you for a minute there.
Characters. The film was a great adaptation of the book. Okay, the film adaptation of The Kite Runner was great, but I preferred the book where it delved into these particular characters and how they were affected by the war that went on in Afghanistan. So for me, that is a book that I recommend to everybody.
Lovely. It's not one that I've read yet, but I have heard good things about that, so it's one I have to watch.
Highly recommended.
Yeah.
You've read it, have you, Paul?
Yeah, I remember back in the old days, when I was a hippie, doing the hippie trail across from UK to India, passing through Afghanistan in the old days, before all of the wars. I remember Kabul, walking through Kabul, a little bit, let's say, in an altered state, and I remember seeing all of the kites flying across Kabul. And I remember Kabul in those days was extraordinary place.
And what the book depicts is how it used to be in the past, and what had happened during the regime that occurred, and the war. Unfortunately, it destroyed a lot of the culture that was built up there. But these are the lives, the life that we're living in at the moment, where particular things aren't cherished or treasured in some particular way.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Paul, what was there a book or film or TV program that's had an impact on you?
I think the most, more in the last few years, I think it's Peaky Blinders.
Oh, yeah.
It just seemed to embrace so much and talk to so much on so many levels. I think for me that's really a film again. Oppenheimer, of course. A book. I tend to read thrillers at the moment.
Nice.
I'm not very intellectual in my reading at the moment.
I think you make up for that elsewhere, so don't worry about that.
Indeed.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's some great ones as well. Peaky Blinders. I mean, it's just such a great piece of TV, and especially the early series where it showcases the post World War One side of things, and that's really interesting. That is, and some of the shell shocked characters. That's what brings it to reality, doesn't it? So yeah, very interesting. So we'll delve very briefly onto the blockchain side of things and cryptocurrency. Obviously, myself and Jem, fairly well versed with blockchain and cryptocurrency, and obviously Zero Citizen is building on Cardano blockchain. But for yourself, Paul, have you got any experience or what's your knowledge or dealing with blockchain?
I have to say I've got absolutely no knowledge of dealing with blockchain or cryptocurrency. So this is just something it's really not my area. It's not my area of expertise.
No problem at all, Paul. In general, have you heard many positive things or generally negative sort of connotations associated with blockchain and cryptocurrencies?
I think blockchain, there's a sort of a certain ambivalence to blockchain and certain concern about aspects of cryptocurrency. Yeah,
and that's definitely one of the sort of reservations I think many people have. Generally there are quite negative connotations in that it's just used for black market trading, etc. And I think there's a big education piece that needs to be done still for that, and bring.
I'll keep an open mind.
Of course. Just a point to note as well, though, and this is a bit of a side topic, but a couple of years ago, it was infamously quoted that Bitcoin consumes more electricity than the whole of Argentina did, and also the UAE, and that was in 2021. With that in mind, for both of you, do you foresee any governmental intervention or regulation because of these energy-intensive blockchains?
Ben, for me personally, I can't see an intervention, because I feel that if governments are invested into Bitcoin, then I don't believe sanctions would be placed into that particular sector. So I just feel it's just going to run its course, and maybe possibly let's forget about that part and let's ride forward in some way.
What about extra taxes, though? Do you think they might introduce extra taxes?
There's all that I'm thinking. I think that 2050, 2040 aspect within becoming carbon neutral, carbon zero. So possibly in that direction. Any other way, I'm slightly hesitant in if there would be some implication of some taxes or sanctions.
Yeah. How about yourself, Paul? From the outside looking in, do you think it's something that governments may or perhaps even should look at introducing?
Completely outside my area of expertise. I've got no.
No worries at all. And well, that segues into the main reason why we're here, Paul, and that's to talk about yourself. And I'm very pleased to introduce to the listeners Dr. Paul Dorfman, an associate fellow at the University of Sussex, chair of the Nuclear Consulting Group, member of the Irish government's Environmental Protection Agency, and an advisor to other governments as well. And among other things, he's led a European Environmental Agency response to the Fukushima incident. Paul, it is great to have you on here. There was a huge bio list, and I was going to read them all out, but I figured it would probably take a bit too long. Paul, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Okay. In my youth, I was a bit of a bad boy, actually. I was. I dropped out of university when I was young. Various jobs. Bit of a breakdown, actually, and ended up a fisherman on the Red Sea.
Wow.
Yeah, with my two partners. One was a Bedouin, the other was an Israeli. A boat called the Viaggi Sen Porto, which is Italian for voyager without port. And strangely enough, the Italian colors are the same as the Palestinian colors.
Yep.
And, so I spent a lot of time in the desert, and then started to, bit by bit, put my life together over a 10-year period, quite a long period of reconstruction, actually. And I thought, well, what am I going to do now? I was a gardener for a while, and then I got a dodgy knee, and I thought, well, what am I going to do? So I thought, I know what, I'll take a degree. So I did a degree in environmental science, which I found just absolutely fascinating. And at the same time, I was, I had a family, and it was, basically on the dole, that kind of level of finance.
Yeah.
And I found it amazing. I found it, enlightening, basically, understanding things about the nature of the environment. And then straight after, I got I was really blessed by being allowed to do a doctorate, and with a bit of money put my way to do that. And at the same time, a little bit of teaching at the same time. So from a student, I became a teacher and a doctorate researcher. And during that time, amazingly, and my doctorate was about the impact of nuclear plant on people's health, basically. And that's both civil and also military nuclear plant. And halfway through my doctorate, amazingly, I was appointed secretary to a UK government scientific advisory committee on the risk of internal radiation. So I ran a Whitehall office, a government Whitehall office, for about 3 or 4 years.
Wow.
on the most complex part of radiation risk, which is internal. Basically, what that means is what happens when a bit of radiation gets inside a human being.
Yeah.
Look at in an epidemiological way and in a sort of radiological, biological way. It's a hugely complex issue. And it was a hugely contested experience. There was a lot of infighting. There was a lot of nasty things that were going on during that committee.
Wow.
And at the end of the day, I was really glad to get out of it.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, what am I going to do now? And I thought, well, I know, I'll look at something that's more sort of democratic. So I did a study on how every local authority communicates with its local community about local air quality. And through that, I got into participatory democracy and air quality and all that kind of thing. But then the nuclear thing kept on drawing me back, because my doctorate was about nuclear, and a doctorate is kind of like, it's a huge piece of work. It just dominates your life. You really can't do it. And so I got back into nuclear, and that was at the time that Blair said nuclear's back with a vengeance. So I knew that something was coming.
Yeah.
I knew that by about 2005, I knew that the UK was going nuclear, basically. And so I thought, well, what am I going to do? I thought, I know what, let's create a community, a high-level community of professors, doctors, experts, and academics to consider this issue. So I helped by everybody to create the Nuclear Consulting Group, which is a group of maybe about 100 professors, doctors, experts, all concerned about the impact of nuclear on the environment and humans. And the reality, of course, that the renewable evolution is here. I mean, that's I mean, everybody and her auntie says that renewables will do the heavy lifting for net zero. If there's one thing that we need to consider in this mad world that we live in, where everything seems to be going to hell in a handcart, is that the renewable evolution is here. 87% of all new power capacity generation worldwide last year was renewables. 87%. So there's a lot of sort of, you know, discussion about all of the problems and concerns, and quite rightly so. But the fact is, okay, and it's not just me that's saying, it's the International Energy Agency, which is the key, you know, organization worldwide. Everybody says it is a fact that renewables will do the heavy lifting for net zero. And that will change the way we do things, not simply in terms of energy, but also in terms of a lot of the wars we've been fighting, what do you call it, Afghanistan, Iraq, you could even call Ukraine an energy war, because it's there's a pipeline running through it, have been fought over power and energy. The point about renewables is it's difficult to fight about wind. It's difficult to fight about where the wind blows and where the sun shines. So the point about renewables is that it won't simply change the way we do energy. It'll also change the way we do strategic military as well too. And that will make a very, very, very significant difference to all our lives. Anyway, to get back onto me, little me, so I sort of carried on doing stuff. I started working with the Ministry of Defense on dismantling, not creating, but dismantling the laid-up nuclear submarine flotilla. Okay?
Yep.
How to dismantle it, what to do with the reactors, what to do with the waste. And I worked on that for 10 years, working with the UK Ministry of Defense. I worked with, as discussed, I led the European Environment Agency response to Fukushima. The French government asked me to advise them on the eventual decommissioning of all its nuclear power plant. And at the very last stage of their inquiry, they invited me and the head of EDF decommissioning to sort of debate between us, you know, what to do about this. And amazingly, incredibly, I sort of won, and they accepted that. And the French government said that EDF had neither the necessary money nor the technology to actually, at present, its extant nuclear fleet.
Wow.
In terms of the UK, much more difficult. It's been a long, hard trench war in the UK. Nobody really understands why. Why has the UK gone nuclear, or is going nuclear for the time being? Nobody really can get their heads around it. Is it something about corruption, or is it something about influence, or is it something about ignorance or understanding, or what? Nobody really quite understands, actually. Now, what's happened is that the UK wants about 24 gigawatts, which is a huge amount of nuclear, and it'll never get anywhere near that. Largely the reason being that the UK government has accepted that it takes up to about 17 years to build one nuclear power station. 17 years to build one nuclear power station. Now, in the meantime, renewable energy capacity added to energy systems around the world grew by 50% in 2023, reaching about 510 gigawatt. And so it's basically, the amazing thing about this is that in the science, okay, the science says that renewables are everywhere and nuclear is nowhere, and that's a fact. I mean, that's just, it's just not disputed. That's just simply what is going on. Okay, the reason is, of course, is that renewables are about 4-5 times cheaper than nuclear. Nuclear takes about 17 years for one nuclear power station. Renewables can be put down, whether it's solar, whether it's wind, or the rest of it, much, much, much quicker. And when you think about energy, okay, or in this case, electricity, you've got to think about it in the round. It's not simply how you supply the energy, electricity, okay, the generation of it. It's how you transport it, how it's used, how it's conserved, how it's managed, how it's stored. So energy is not simply about sort of base generation. In fact, the lowest hanging fruit, one of the things that's most important in terms of the energy crisis is energy management and energy efficiency. In other words, insulation and creation of our houses. And we know that the UK housing stock is lousy. We know that it's really difficult to insulate the UK housing stock. We all lived in drafty UK houses.
Yeah.
And we know, what that's about. However, in terms of the lowest hanging fruit and the least money spent, that's really, honestly, that's where you've got to put your bang for buck. Now, so to get back to nuclear, so we don't really quite know what's going on with the UK. Hinkley Point is being built as usual. It's hugely overcost, hugely over time. And the problem with it, it's taking so much money to build, is that we can't put our money into the kinds of things that will actually make a difference.
Yeah.
Then there's the potential for Sizewell C to come online, and there's a decision about that maybe later next year. And the problem is there's a cross-party sort of consensus that Labour, Tories, they both say that nuclear is kind of good for us, which is really, really, really difficult to understand, actually. I mean, it actually is, in pure scientific terms, really, really difficult to understand. So, I mean, take a snapshot sort of globally. In COP28, which was the big sort of, climate and energy, meeting that happened just, a couple of months ago, the big news was nuclear would triple itself by 2050. Okay, that was the big news. So nuclear tripled by 2050.
Okay.
Now the thing that was really important is that there was also this promise, or the same kind of thing, that triple renewables by 2030. So nuclear 2050, renewables by 2030. Now, what does that mean in practice? Well, if you triple nuclear by 2050, you'll get 1.2 terawatts. I mean, it doesn't matter what a terawatt is. Just think of the number 1.2. Okay. Terawatt is a huge amount of power.
Yeah.
If you triple renewables by 2030, okay, not 2050, but by 2030, you'll get 11.5 terawatts. Okay. So 2050 plays 2030. And 1.2 plays 11.5. That's the science.
Yeah.
I mean, that is where we are. Now, we know that in terms of climate, we have to stabilize. Okay, and we have to stabilize as soon as possible. So the reality is, whether you like nuclear, whether you don't like nuclear, we simply do not have time for nuclear. Whether you like nuclear, whether you don't like nuclear, nuclear is quite simply marginal. Also the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, has stated quite clearly in its last AR6 report, which was about spring of last year, that renewables is 10 times better than nuclear at CO2. So if you're worried about climate, renewables is 10 times better. And then go to talk about climate. Now, the problem with nuclear is that it needs to be beside the coast, or by large bodies of water, or by rivers, to cool the reactors and to cool the high-level nuclear spent fuel. Okay, it's really dirty and dangerous. It all needs to be cooled. Okay, Now, we know it's going to happen with the coast, and we know it's going to happen with the rivers. The coast is going to rise stepwise. We think the coast is going to rise stepwise, but the problem with coasts is that is a thing called storm surge. What storm surge is where certain atmospheric conditions meet high tides, and the sea basically just ups and moves inland. Okay? And we know, there's no question about it, we know that storm surge is going to happen and is increasing worldwide. So essentially, within a couple of decades, you're talking about very significant flooding for coastal nuclear. Meanwhile, inland, we know already that France has started to switch down and power down its nuclear reactors that are situated by the rivers, because they can't get the cooling, because the river flows go down and the river is heated, so it can't cool the reactors and spent fuel. And also, the reactors can't discharge their used cooling water, because it would basically kill the environment of the river.
Yeah.
So whether you're talking about inland nuclear or coastal nuclear, within about 20 years, it really is a no-no. So this notion of nuclear as a savior from climate, which is really the last gasp for nuclear, is fallacious. It really doesn't work. Now, going back to me, I sort of rambled from university to university. I started at the University of West of England, which is a marvelous former polytechnic, where I had my best university experience. Wonderful people. I just absolutely love the place. It just couldn't be better as far as I was concerned. And the teachers I found to be marvelous.
Was this once you've got your doctorate, was it, Paul?
Yeah, at the University of West England. At the university, yeah. I did my first degree and I did my doctorate at the UE, at the University of the West of England. Then I got high tone and I moved to Warwick University, University of Warwick, which is a bit of a high tone university. I really didn't enjoy it. The people I found to be unfriendly. I didn't like it that much. Then I moved up again to University College London, which is well-known university.
It's a good one. Yeah.
10 years. 10 years, they loved me. For 10 years, I couldn't do anything wrong. And then I did one wrong tweet. Seriously.
That's all it takes nowadays.
One wrong tweet, and also critically, I was about to get involved in government research on the future of advanced nuclear.
Right.
Okay. And basically they wanted me off that. And this is multi-million research.
Wow.
There's a lot of money involved. And between this one wrong tweet and the money involved for government research, they threw me out on my backside. Wow. Like seriously. I mean, they slung me out with knobs on.
Wow. But was this based on an opinion of yours that wasn't maybe as favourable towards nuclear energy? No, that's not true. I made a mistake. I tweet a huge amount because I think that it's important to communicate. Yeah.
So I tweet, thousands and thousands and thousands, and I just got one wrong.
Right.
And it's my mistake. I'll own up to it, the less. But anyway, it worked out well because basically I joined my old university, the University of Sussex. And the University of Sussex, when I was a young bad boy, was actually the university that slung me out as a 19-year-old for being a bad boy.
Yeah.
And then I was invited back into the University of Sussex, and here I am as an old guy. Basically. I was really pleased. There was a sense of circularity to my experience.
Yeah.
And I feel really pleased and blessed by that. So I feel very happy about that particular part of my experience.
Paul, I love your honesty, by the way.
Yeah.
You have to be honest, don't you?
Yeah.
There's no other way.
It's true.
100%.
Yeah.
I'm very curious to, you mentioned about the risks, associated with sort of building on the coast or on coastal areas, these nuclear plants. That obviously sort of leads to, I guess, like sort of Fukushima and what happened there. And whilst we're at it, can you tell us a bit more about the team, the European team that you led to the follow-up of the Fukushima incident?
Well, no, what this was a written report response to Fukushima. So there was no visit to Fukushima.
Okay.
We knew what would happen. Basically, the IAEA and the UK ONR, basically these organizations went there, and basically they said, well, it's not too bad actually, and off they popped.
Right.
Okay? And we knew that would happen. Okay, and then the question was, the point about Fukushima is that Chernobyl was like a car crash, if you like, but Fukushima is a slow motion disaster, basically. So Fukushima is ongoing. You've got significant, hugely toxic substances that have melted through the reactors that no one knows how to get to, that no one knows how to deal with. Okay. Yeah. And it's just so it's something that is there, and everybody is thinking, well, it's Fukushima is old and it's gone. Well, no, it hasn't gone away. Okay, it's something that is there and is still hugely impactful.
Yeah,
and needs to be dealt with. I led the European Environment Agency response to Fukushima in a report which looked at both Chernobyl and Fukushima, and also other questions associated with nuclear. And it was post Fukushima. Okay, yeah. But the reality is, of course, is that Fukushima is ongoing. That's the reality.
And it was a few months ago that they started to release some of the quoted treated water back into the sea as well, and that was sort of widely reported. And there's China, obviously a nearby neighbor, and other neighboring countries were deeply concerned about this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I was giving a talk. I was on the same platform in the UK Parliament as Naoto Kan, who's the premier prime minister of Japan at the time of Fukushima. Now, Naoto Kan is a very, very good man. And since Fukushima, he's devoted his life to going around the world saying, whatever you do, please don't do nuclear.
Wow.
Okay. Now, he's the prime minister of Japan at time of Fukushima. And after we both spoke to the UK Parliament, after UK Parliament, we went to some really ritzy restaurant, and we talked via a translator. And one of the things that really struck me was that he said that if the wind was in the wrong direction, we would have lost Tokyo.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's true, because the point about Fukushima is that the vast, I mean, by the grace of whoever it is, the vast amount of the pollution went out to sea. Okay, the wind was in the right direction, thankfully. Okay, if the wind was in the wrong direction, according to Naoto Kan, Prime Minister of Japan at the time of Fukushima, they would have had to evacuate Tokyo. So and the same thing for when we talk about Zaporizhzhia. So far we've escaped. You can imagine. I mean, there's no nuclear plant in the world that can withstand a military attack. It can't happen. It just won't happen. Okay. Now, when real munitions hit, and you're not simply talking about reactors, but also far less well-defended spent fuel ponds, which with high-level waste, then you need to seriously worry. So in the questions of an increasingly unstable world, which we are living in now, we need to really consider where we're going. And this pulls back into the question of energy and also questions of climate. Because why go for more of the kind of stuff that is actually let's face it, pretty dangerous, and it's proven to be pretty dangerous, where in fact the alternative,
it's right in front of you.
I mean, if you fire into a solar farm, or you fire into a wind farm, well, okay, you're going to destroy the solar farm or the wind farm, but that's about it.
Yeah.
So, and also this business about a strategic military, you cannot fight a war about where the wind blows. You cannot fight a war about where the sun shines.
Yeah.
So there are all kinds of strategic military implications for the renewable evolution.
Yeah.
And what that implies, and all that implies.
And as pointed out, it's those plants themselves can be used as a weapon. The threat to the local population from an hostile.
Putin has done that. Putin has threatened nuclear 11 times so far.
Yeah.
11 times he's threatened nuclear so far, and of course Zaporizhzhia as well too. So clearly, and then one talks about, there's questions of the Middle East, whether it's Iran or Israel, which clearly Israel has a nuclear, Dimona has a nuclear capacity. UAE, Saudi is making no bones about wanting some form of nuclear capacity, and then the discussion goes to, well, then actually, if you want to diminish the problem, okay, I mean, when one thinks about power plays, where would the Cold War be fought? Well, the old Cold War between the US and Russia would have been fought in Europe, particularly in Germany, okay, but moreover in Europe. That would have been the sacrifice ground.
Yeah,
that's what would have happened, okay. And then one thinks, well, if Saudi tool up, and Iran are tooling up clearly, but if Saudi tooled up, where would the proxy war, if there was, heaven forbid, an exchange, where would that exchange? It would be in the Middle East.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be in Washington. It wouldn't be in Moscow. So there's very serious questions about this question, sort of paradoxical endangerment, where one thinks it's rather like a kid carrying a knife, thinking that knife will defend themselves. Well, in certain circumstances, potentially that may be true, but in other circumstances, potentially not at all.
Yeah.
So there's very serious questions to be asked about the potential militarization of nuclear and what that implies for our future safety. And Saudi needs to consider this very, very clearly.
Yeah, and it's a really serious and a vital point to take into consideration going forward for any country, considering nuclear or maintaining their nuclear capabilities. Just going back to the reactors, I've read about the new generation 4 nuclear reactors, how they're much more fuel efficient, reduce the nuclear waste as well. But that surely still has the same underlying risk as the previous plants.
Yeah. Okay. There's no such thing as Gen 4 nuclear. I mean, it doesn't exist. It's on the back of a fag packet. Gen 4 nuclear. It's a design that is simply not here.
Right.
So advanced nuclear, whether it's thorium, molten salt, SMRs, small modular reactors, they don't exist. Okay. Nowhere in the world is a small modular reactor. They simply don't exist. All of these designs are a decade or more away. Okay. So, and then one thinks about climate, to actually push this out on an industrial level, given that a large nuclear reactor takes 17 years to construct. So all these things are decades and decades away.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of, will it create less waste? Is it more efficient? Is it more effective? Is it safer? Well, actually, the former head of US nuclear regulation has written a report stating that small modular reactors on Mars produce more waste per kilowatt hour than conventional reactors.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and the same is true for these so-called new generation 4 reactors. How can you say really? In fact, the problem with nuclear is that they always overpromise. costs. This is sort of big boys and their toys. Look, you just give us a few billion and we'll resolve this.
Yeah.
The reality is those billions are lost, and we need those. Now, when climate hits, and it will hit, and it is hitting.
Yeah.
Okay, money is paper, but it is also resources. We will need all the resources that we can deploy to ameliorate, to survive. Now, if we don't have the time, and we certainly don't have the money for nuclear, but we certainly don't have the time for nuclear. But what we do have is the capacity for renewables plus to avert the worst of climate.
Yeah.
Change the ways that we do things, and that is not simply a civil advantage in terms of climate, but it's also sort of a military advantage in terms of it doesn't proliferate, because where you have civil nuclear, then it can flow into military nuclear. Now, that said, okay, I'm for multilateral disarmament. I am not for unilateral disarmament. Okay, I don't want to live in a world where Putin has a nuclear arms, and if you like, I don't.
Yeah.
Okay, I am a pragmatist.
Of course.
Now, there are huge problems associated with that, and I agree, and I understand that. Okay, we live in a nasty world full of lots of bad things happening. So I am for multilateral disarmament. Everybody pulls away from military nuclear power. But in terms of civil nuclear, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, in so many ways, it doesn't make sense. And in terms of SMRs, small modular reactors, the market for small modular reactors will be in both developed and developing worlds. So this business about pushing nuclear onto states that may not have the regulatory infrastructure to handle, and also, may be pushed into some form of military as well too. In other words, it might go proliferation.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of questions that need to be asked about this. So you can begin to see the horrible world that I live in, which is full of paradoxes and sort of irrational paradoxes and sort of nightmare scenarios, basically. That is the nuclear military industrial complex.
Do you think there's any technological advancements that you see being a positive towards nuclear, that could be like a positive way forward, or do you think it's just a case of
basically it's a 20th century technology. Okay? It really has not moved on from the 20th century. Yeah. And that includes all of the so-called Gen 4 and SMR technologies. This is an old technology. It just simply is. It's a way to boil water. As Einstein said, what a way to boil water. So it's not really an advanced technology. It's a hugely complex technology, but that's largely because it puts into place second-order safety regimes, okay? Because it is literally so dangerous.
Yeah.
The basic technology of boiling water through nuclear is it's quite simply not that difficult, okay? So it's an old technology. That's the point about it. It's an old technology. And then one talks about fusion. And the joke about fusion is, for the last 70 years, fusion has always been 20 years in the future. Is this a way to prove that time doesn't exist in modern physics? So that's the sort of the in-joke about fusion. In other words, fusion is now still 20 years away. 10 years ago, it was 20 years ago. 20 years away, it was 20 years away. 30 years ago, it was 20 years away. And the most advanced fusion in CERN, the CERN reactors in France, they state clearly they have no way that they will produce a commercial fusion within the next 20 or 30 years.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, the problem is, I mean, there's loads of counterfactual stuff that one gets on the web, and people talking about stuff, and can you trust them? Can you not trust them, and all this kind of stuff. And then when one thinks about it, there's this huge PR for nuclear, and so then one thinks, well, surely some of this must be right. Surely, some of this is true. The problem with nuclear is that it's a very, very significant lobby. There's a huge amount of money, a huge amount of power, a huge amount of energy placed into it, a huge amount of influence, political influence as well too. Yeah. And of course, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, as we have discussed, it is both. There is a significant overlay between civil and military nuclear. So that really comes into play as well too.
Yeah.
And recently, the Sunak government has been and the French government have been making play with that quite overtly. Whereas before, the governments have always tried to pan back from the idea that civil and military were linked. So clearly, it's obvious. Obviously, it's civil as military.
Yeah, yeah.
It goes without saying. I mean, it's of course. So the sort of getting back to the point of it. It really is a conundrum. And if one actually looks at the science, in other words, 87% of all new power capacity generation worldwide 2023 was renewable, with nuclear nowhere. That's a fact.
Yep.
If you triple by COP20, COP28 said that it wanted to triple nuclear by 2050, that would be 1.2 terawatts. That's a fact. If you tripled renewables, they wanted to triple renewables by 2030. That's 11.5 terawatts. That's a fact. So if you look at the facts, if you look at the science, nuclear is actually marginal.
Yeah.
So then the question is, well, what is all this? What's it all about?
What's it for? Yeah.
And no one really knows, actually. No one knows why. It's just something that just seems to be happening at the moment.
Yeah, as you mentioned, where there's billions of dollars and pounds trading hands, then there's always vested interest. There's always people trying to protect those billions. Yeah. I believe Jem's got a question for you. So.
Yeah, I do, and it stems. It kind of pivots away from nuclear and it focuses on renewable energy itself. So this is one for you, Paul. Are there any emerging trends or innovations in renewable energy that you particularly find exciting or promising?
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's. I mean, the numbers are renewable energy capacity added to energy systems around the world grew by 50% in 2023. Adding, I mean, I'll say 510 gigawatt. Okay, it may not mean much to you, but 510 gigawatt is a stonking, just a literally stonking amount of energy. That's equivalent to the entire power capacity of Germany, France, and Spain combined. That's just in one year. And we know what Germany is about. I mean, Germany is mass production. I mean, kind of, when one looks at renewables, and the nearest to us in Germany, which is nuclear free, renewables provided 52% of German power in 2023, and wind overtook coal. So everyone's talking about, German coal, German coal and this kind of thing. Well, wind power overtook coal in terms of power, German power in 2023. Now, what's important here, okay, is the big white elephant, okay? We're talking about electricity here, not energy. Now, in general, electricity is about 20% of total energy. I mean, energy is energy, okay? And then electricity, which we have to go to because of climate, is about 20% of that, okay? So I've been talking about German power. Power is a short way of talking about electricity. So everyone, everywhere, okay, has a long way to go in terms of energy, in terms of oil, gas, and coal. Okay, but this can be done. Okay, this can be done. Heat pumps, by the way. A lot of people slag them off. They don't work. All this kind of stuff. It's true. It's absolutely true. okay, that you do need to get your insulation right before heat pumps. There's no question about it, and we know, we've all lived in drafty UK homes, you know, and it's a nightmare. So insulation first, then heat pumps, and then the question is, well, how do you heat pump if you live in a tower block, or if you live in apartments, or, you know, all the rest of that? But there are ways through that as well too. There are ways through that. But it depends on political will, and it depends on money. Professor Mark Jacobson from Stanford University is the kind of the leading light worldwide on renewables. And if you look at his stuff, which is wind, water, solar, that sort of leads the way to show basically how things can be done. And it's not simply just me and guys like Mark Jacobson, but it's also the International Energy Agency, that renewables will do the heavy lifting for net zero, and blah, 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 blah. The reality is there is no such thing as a free lunch. We are in deep, okay? And we sort of have a bit of a paddle. And the way forward is the electrification of everything. There's no question about it. I mean, just that has to happen. Now, the quickest, easiest way to do that is via renewables. Nuclear is too long and too expensive and too dangerous. And we have to get our act together because time, you know, we're on the clock here. Over the past 4 years, renewables worldwide output has trebled, okay, with a surge in wind and solar. Same in America. America isn't going nuclear. There's been one new nuclear power plant, hugely overcost and hugely over time, built in the last 20 years. America's not going nuclear. California is about 51% wind, water, solar annual average for its power, for its electricity. Nearly 3/4 of the fall in emissions by 2030 in Europe came from renewables, energy efficiency, and electrification. Okay, so that's the sort of, you know, and there's this business of what happens when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. Well, monthly data shows that wind and solar complement each other across seasons to provide you know, so the wind doesn't blow, the sun shines. When the sun doesn't shine, the wind blows. But if the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, there are still ways of coping with that in terms of increasing storage and interconnection. Morocco is creating sort of huge solar banks which hope to power a significant amount of Europe's power. So it's a question of interconnection. Now, in terms of interconnection as well, too, that's another way of linking communities, people, populations, and countries. Because if the wind doesn't blow where we are, it may blow in Poland or Germany or Ukraine or whatever. If the sun doesn't shine in Ukraine, maybe it'll blow in Morocco. So again, that has sort of social, pragmatic, social, military implications as well too.
Yeah, definitely. I absolutely agree there. In terms of you know, the oil and gas fields that have recently been given licenses in the North Sea for the UK, and there's also a coal mine as well that was recently okayed. What's I can sort of guess your response, but what's your take on that? And obviously they're using energy security as their justification. You know, do you buy that, or do you believe that, you know, renewable energy could quite easily, you know?
Well, like you say, I mean, there's no such thing as a free lunch. But there are also facts. Now the facts are, okay. The facts are that if we go for this new oil, okay, this new oil or this new gas, okay, the vast majority is set for export, so it's not for home consumption. It just isn't. Okay, and that's a fact. Okay, and then you get into the difficulties about the energy and the electricity market, because the energy market is actually dominated by, well, we won't go into it, but it's problematic. The way the energy market works is problematic. But in any case, put that to one side. So this business about new drill is, first off, it doesn't work in terms of energy security, okay? Okay, it won't power the UK.
Yeah.
Okay, it has nothing to do with the UK. Okay, nothing to do with the UK. If you add that to, I mean, when one meets IPCC people who really do the research underpinning climate, they're all kind of like white-faced and handshaking, you know. The reality about climate is actually very scary. Make no bones, okay? We're in deep, okay? So the notion, it's almost like a sort of a death cult. Then you get onto energy management, conservation, efficiency, storage, interconnection, and and change the way we, the built environment and our transport infrastructure. Okay, so you're talking about I don't like to call it a revolution because revolutions have a bad connotation, but an evolution. Okay, you're talking about an evolution that we can do. It can happen. Okay, and it will. And the point about it is that it won't simply change the way in terms of climate or power or energy. It'll change the way we do things socially, how we relate to each other. Okay, how we relate to other people. When we turn on that light or get in that bus or tram, and we know that it's powered by sustainable electricity, it will change our feelings, our emotions, our thoughts, and that will change us, and that will change us. Socially, politically, and spiritually, in fact. So we're caught in at a moment where of complete disaster when one looks at the horrors of what's going on in the world today and the potential horrors of climate, and we're caught like a rabbit in the headlight. But behind that, okay, is the reality of the renewable evolution, which is the one and very great and very honest and straightforward ray of hope. That's not just, it's not a minor thing. It's something that is sort of massive, actually. So one needs to consider that resonance, and what that means. And this is important not just for old guys like me, but it's critically important for our children, grandchildren, the young, to understand that there is hope, and there are, and it's not sort of some sort of rosy toad hope. Okay, we're talking about practicalities here. Okay, there are ways forward out of this.
Paul, it's been absolutely fantastic hearing about you. I mean, I think we're all in agreement. Renewable energy is the logical way forward. And it's more needs to be done quicker. Like you said, we're approaching these set deadlines. The 1.5 degrees C. It's I think it's 2023. It looked like we're already getting sort of close to that as it is. But it's been great to hear about you. It's been great to learn about your journey and how you've gotten here. And I just want to say a huge thank you for giving us your time and sharing your thoughts on nuclear, on renewables, and the whole range of other things as well that we discussed. Jim, unless there's anything else from yourself.
Yeah,
mate.
I do. I also like to mirror what Ben has said. The statistics that you've given us today, especially with regards the renewable energy and the creation of these the structures for that for 2030, and how that compares with the nuclear energy and how long that takes to create that, again, that structure of 17 years, and for very little. I think there does need to be a mind change, a shift in direction, to definitely have a focus on renewable energy. And listening to you has been an inspiration, to be honest. And I appreciate the things that you've said and how honest you were. So I've got to share that appreciation.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you, Ben. It's been a privilege to share thoughts with you.
Absolutely, our pleasure. And for those listening or watching, Dr. Paul Dorfman is on Twitter. You can find him at Dorfman_P. Like you say, he tweets very regularly. It's definitely worth the following at the very least. And once again, Dr. Paul Dorfman, thank you so much for your time.
Great. Cheers. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.